Hello, and thanks for joining me today for Gary Glenn Reports. I'm privileged to have today three guests. We're going to talk about energy policy. I have John Bartos. John, welcome. And Steve Ellebrock and Ted Skinner. Their job today is to help educate and inform you and me about energy policy, some of their projects here in Midland County, which are examples not only for our county, but for other people who are interested in alternative forms of energy and energy independence all across our state. I'm Vice Chairman of the House Energy Policy Committee and have studied, I think, harder than I have since college to get up to speed and try to do my best to help create good policy for the state of Michigan. Number one, to keep our rates low. Michigan has the highest electricity rates in the country, 11th highest in the country, the highest in the Midwest. And so we're going to talk today with John and Steve and Ted about some ways that showing leadership here in Midland County, we can set an example for the rest of the state. So guys, welcome this morning. I appreciate your taking the time. Would each of you take a minute? Steve, I think you said you wanted to start and just give the folks who are watching some idea of your background here in Midland and your business experience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I think first just to talk a little bit about my background. I've been very fortunate and I think just really blessed. I've got a great family, my wife of 38 years and five children, and a 34-year career with Dow, a career that started here in Midland, and then we spent time in Texas. We were then in Singapore for 3.5 years, and then back to New Jersey for another 3 years when Carbide was purchased to help with the integration, and finally ended my career here in Midland. And then in each of those places, in addition to the technology and to the demands of the business, also tried to do things with the community. In Singapore with the Singapore American Chamber of Commerce, and in New Jersey with the New Jersey Chemical Council, and also served as a judge at Princeton University for their graduate school competitions and that sort of thing. And then quite a few things here in Midland. I've always been very interested in energy. I initiated and started the solar energy program at Dow Chemical, which resulted in the Powerhouse shingle, and also was involved in other energy things. For example, Wall Street Journal article a number of years ago where contributed to that article in terms of how energy is used within a big company, because there's competing different interests. In some cases they might want energy efficiency, in other cases they might supply energy, and you have those kind of competing things within a big company and also within individuals. Since retiring, I've really split my time between entrepreneurial interests, mainly around energy and energy companies that I've farmed, and also with community activities. In fact, that's where I met these fine gentlemen. I think Ted was with PAO, Personal Assistance Options, that a charity that he started, and with John with MyTech and the board there to influence the science and technology and help with education, and also at St. Bridget with their school there and some of the charities that we've done. So we've had a nice blend of entrepreneurial businesses, a lot of those centered around energy, and also some of the things we do for the community.
Great, thank you, Steve. Ted?
Yes, I had a 32-year career at Dow Corning. One of my jobs there was Midland Plant Controller, and in that job, which happened to occur when we had the first oil embargo, oil prices went sky high, and we reacted by building a wood chip cogeneration plant. And the only problem we had there was consumers wouldn't let us circulate energy to our Hemlock semiconductor plant, which would have really been a great benefit to Dow Corning if we'd been able to do that. But since then, I also was involved in trying to reduce energy in the state. LS Power was interested in building a power plant here, clean coal, and we ran into some of the same problems where the utilities opposed us, and it became just too difficult to make that happen. And fortunately, I got involved with these guys, and we built that solar array out in Homer Township, which was a success. Really has contributed at this point in time more than 1 million kilowatt hours to the Michigan grid. So it's been a good ride.
Well, that's what I was talking about when I said that we here in Midland County can provide some examples that other people could follow. John?
I'm John Bartos. I am a 75-year-old Midland native, and the only time I've left Midland is when I went away to college for 6 years. And I have worked in both large companies, Dow Chemical and others, and I've also started many small companies in Michigan, Texas, and in Florida. And one of the companies that I started here locally, you might be aware of, is Three Rivers Corporation, and that's still ongoing today. I became interested in energy in 1974 with the Arab oil embargo, and I seen the dramatic impact that the energy prices had on our economy and on our jobs in general. And I was very pleased when Steve asked me about 5 or 6 years ago to join him in looking at ways to do energy more efficiently, and I have done that. The other, and probably 60% of the reason I was very interested in this, has to do with job creation and new jobs in entrepreneurial area. And one of the charts I would like to show is what happens with job creation. And this is something that we use at the Mid-Michigan Innovation Center, which Ted Doan and I helped to get started a number of years ago. And the reason we start that is what you see here on this chart. If you take the jobs that large companies develop, you can see with the, I believe, the red lines, that would be the net job creation in America. And if you look at the overall job creation by young companies with 2, 3, 4, and 5 employees, you see the blue line. And the reason that you see that, that going through is the young companies are the only ones that are really the job creators. A large company has to become more efficient. They have to use technology, so they have to have less jobs to be competitive globally, because labor is quite a bit cheaper,
Right.
Overall. Then the other reason that I really am interested in this, other than the innovation center that we have here, is what has happened with government control, and when government gets involved, like they are now with this energy policy that, thank God, you're working on. You see here what the net effect happens when you get more government involvement. The line right here are the new firms that are created in America. This line, the blue line, are the jobs or the firms that are going out of business. That crossed in 2008, 2009, after many things like Sarbanes-Oxley, many of the other governments got involved
Right.
with the financial worlds and so forth. There's the net effect. That is not a good direction. And so that's one of the reasons that I strongly support things that you are doing, and wish you well with that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, John. And this is a good example of how, as your state representative, I don't have to be an expert on the hundreds of issues that I have to cast a vote on, as long as I can draw on the expertise of people here in our community who are experts on energy and a lot of other issues. Let me ask you guys, the Midland solar applications that you've talked about being involved in, at the time it was built, it was the largest solar array in Michigan. And it's built in Homer Township. You guys, Steve, you took me out to look it over here about a month or so ago. Give us some background on what led you to do that. What led you to put up the biggest solar array, privately owned, presumably? I mean, there might be bigger commercially owned ones, but or industrial. But what led you to put up the biggest solar array in Michigan in Homer Township?
Well, I can start off with that, and there's several reasons. One is technology and the advancement of technology, and I'd had the opportunity to champion some of that with my career at Dow, and also retained a lot of interest in solar energy. I mean, solar energy is a tremendous source of energy, far bigger than any other source that we can possibly have on Earth. In fact, in 1 hour, the sun puts enough energy on the Earth to power the Earth for an entire year. So we don't have to capture very much of that sun in order to serve our energy needs. It's also a technology that's growing rapidly. When we first started with Midland Solar Applications a little over 5 years ago, it was about $8 a watt to install a solar array. Today we're installing those for $2.50 a watt, and we think there's a lot of space to get the cost down.
And how many years was that, Steve?
And that's in 5 years. So in 5 years, it's gone down by almost a factor of 4, and we think there's a lot of headspace for more improvements. We're only at about 20% efficiency with the various semiconductor collectors for solar energy. And there's no reason why we can't up that quite a bit. That would save a lot of costs there. Working with people like like John Bartos and Ted Skinner that know how to build things, we've taken a lot of cost of the balance of system costs, and that's those costs outside of just the solar array itself. And so in order to pursue these interests, we needed to have a facility. And at the time, Consumers Energy wanted to learn more about solar, so there were some incentives to help go build that array, and it allows us to do some experimentation around optics and around semiconductors and just around the balance of system costs in there. It also allows us to bring in co-ops from high school and from college that can work and understand this industry and take away a lot of learning about energy and that sort of thing. And there's a couple other reasons why too we wanted to get that, which John and Ted will talk about as well.
Well, one of the key things that he had with these co-ops is he had this award. What was it, the Rookie of the Year? Alex Posnack.
Yeah, right.
Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, my main interest kind of stemmed from that oil embargo experience and the idea that Michigan is the most expensive energy in the Midwest, as you mentioned. Is solar a way to mitigate some of those costs? And we believe it is for two reasons. One is the peak energy costs, which are 3 or 4 times the cost of normal energy generation if we have to buy it from our surrounding states and that sort of thing.
And Ted, what is peak energy? Let's
Peak
not assume everybody
energy
knows what
occurs in the summer when air conditioning is on and it's
Okay.
the hottest, and it correlates very well with solar energy generation. So that's one of the reasons we think solar is really strong, and it's kind of hard to calculate what the impact is, but if we're paying 3 or 4 times the cost for energy from outside the state, I think it's easy to see that there's a real benefit there. The other aspect is distribution. If you look at your energy bill, the distribution and transmission costs are about 25% of your house energy bill. And if we can put solar on your house, then obviously you eliminate that cost. So those 2 factors alone would make a tremendous difference in the cost of energy in the state of Michigan.
In the array in Homer Township, how do you deliver the electricity it generates from the array to the homes it serves?
Okay, it goes through the lines that go by there, and our array will serve about 38 homes in that area. So it goes directly from our array to those surrounding homes. So you bypass all the transmission and the line losses that are involved when you transmit energy a long way.
But you don't have your own system of lines, or you do, or it's running
No,
through consumers?
it runs
systems
through
of line?
consumers,
Okay.
yeah.
And John, I know you and I have talked about this. The environmental movement is pushing solar energy from a standpoint of concern about global warming and all of that kind of thing. I think I could safely say we're from the conservative side of the spectrum. I know my interest in this is one of energy independence and competition and choice, because that gives people choices. That helps bring down the price of what we're doing, no matter what the product
Right.
is. But what would you say about that, John, in terms of how you would characterize your business approach to this solar issue in particular?
Well, from a business standpoint, and that's one of the reasons I am so interested when I showed you these charts, entrepreneurial thing is what drives America. And we need the entrepreneurs to look for new ways to do that. We especially need that when you look, say, 20, 30 years in the future. And there's a guy named George Friedman that wrote a book, The Next 100 Years. And they looked at what's going to happen with energy in the future. Here we are, we're shutting coal plants down, and because of some of the contaminants and so forth, but yet we're probably using, you take Google, they use 8 times the energy of the normal companies. So where is this energy going to come from? And I strongly feel that the country in the world, or the nation in the world, that's going to dominate the next 100 years is the one that's going to figure out the energy. In this book I mentioned of George Friedman, he talks about getting solar energy from outer space, where you can have this 24 hours per day. So if you have this 24 hours a day and then you send this back to Earth, You figure that out, and in 1974, what was his name? Peter Glaser, Ted?
Peter Glazer, yep.
Peter Glaser envisioned this and sent it back to the Earth, and I'm just hoping that our government is doing research, and that's where they belong, in research, not meddling in our businesses or trying to control the utilities. And if they're doing that, we're going to be in good shape in the future. And we try to do this from the local standpoint here to support our industry that's invested many hundreds of millions of dollars in energy. You know, it's what Steve did in Dow and then Dow Corning and HSC and so forth. And so I really think that that's where the future is. But it's going to start with the government having their right role, and that's doing the research, and then the entrepreneurs implementing it.
Well, my son and I had the privilege here a week ago of touring Argonne National Laboratory near Chicago, where they had the first nuclear chain reaction back during World War II. And my son had already decided he might be interested in being a chemical or a mechanical engineer, but now he got all fired up, wants to look at doing internships over there. He's 17 years old, senior year here in Midland. Now he wants to think about being a nuclear. You know, we spent the entire day with nuclear physicists from Spain and Africa and Italy and wherever else, Russian, I think. So I told him, I said, we're sitting here with some of the smartest people in the world, and he really enjoyed it. Told me it was a better trip than when I took him to a football game, so it really sparked an interest there. John, you started talking about the future of solar energy, but I'm wondering, from a cost standpoint, why do you think solar energy in particular is going to be offer such promise in the future from a cost standpoint?
Yeah, I may start with that. And we talked a little bit about the fact of the abundance of solar energy. We've also talked about the fact that we're very dear to grid parity. Grid parity is where an individual or a company can use solar energy for the same price that they can get it from the grid from large power plants. And of course it adds oftentimes those other great attributes such as distributive energy, so you're not putting it across lines, you don't have to build the infrastructure to go and do that. And also it's from a security standpoint, if someone wanted to hurt the United States of America, a real good way to do that would be to take out some of these grids, and if you got this distributed, it would be a much better and a lower cost way to do it. It's almost always cheaper if we can introduce some competition. This would introduce competition. As you know, you've sponsored things that are doing that, and we very much appreciate that. You're starting to crack the door open to competition. In fact, when we built the Homer Array, we had to teach the consumers folks, very good engineers, very good folks. We really enjoyed working with them, but we had to teach them about starting and educate them about starting, you know, with the solar array and with a fair amount of power and how we interface that to the grid. And because it interfaced flawlessly into the grid. There's no disruption of power, no surge of power, and we brought in the experts in the industry to work with the local engineers here at Consumers, and really had a good relationship in tying that up.
Well, one of the frustrations we find with energy policy right now in Lansing, or at least I do from a free market perspective, is the utilities are actually sponsoring legislation on net metering, which I'm going to let one of you guys describe that better than I can. But they have legislation right now that it says if you had solar shingles that Dow makes on your roof and you generate enough electricity to service your home, but then you generate excess electricity, they want you to have to sell it to them at wholesale, what you generate off your own roof, and then buy it back from them at the retail price. That's not a good way to incentivize the development of more solar energy in the state of Michigan. It seems to me that we ought to be incentivizing, encouraging, making it more profitable for somebody to be energy independent. But competition is, you know, we have some entrenched business interests that are privileged by the government to be the gatekeeper that allows anybody onto the distribution network. And competition doesn't seem to be a concept that they want to have us entertain.
Yeah, there's quite a few concepts that you brought up there that are pet peeves of ours. I think one is, you know, these public utilities things were set up, and they were set up a long time ago. I think in Michigan it was around 1919.